Get out of here right now. You don't belong. The words cut through the quiet afternoon like shards of broken glass. They came from Jane Mitchell, standing at the edge of her pristine lawn, arms crossed tightly across her chest, eyes narrowed on a little girl who could not have looked more harmless. 7-year-old Betty Williams sat frozen on her bright pink bicycle, her tiny fingers clutching the handlebars so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her unicorn sneakers, the ones that lit up with each pedal, blinked nervously under the heavy glare of an adult determined to make her feel unwelcome. Betty's lower lip trembled. She hadn't been doing anything wrong, just circling the block, searching the cracks in the sidewalk for shiny rocks the way her father once taught her. In her backpack was a small magnifying glass her teacher had given her that very morning, a gift that made Betty feel like a real scientist. To her, this neighborhood was a new adventure. To Jane Mitchell, it was her fortress, and Betty was an intruder. From across the street, Jane's voice grew sharper. "I've called the police. They'll deal with you." Betty's heart pounded in her chest. At 7 years old, she only understood police in the simplest way. They came when bad people did bad things. But she wasn't bad. She hadn't done anything wrong. Yet, suddenly, she found herself the center of a scene that felt frightening, confusing, and unreal. Jane turned away, phone pressed to her ear, her tone shifting into false concern. She spoke deliberately, each word dripping with the kind of prejudice that had destroyed lives long before Betty was even born. Betty clutched her worn stuffed unicorn star to her chest and whispered, "I just want my mommy." What no one knew, not Jane, not the neighbors beginning to peek out their windows, not even the officers racing toward Maple Street, was that Betty's mother was the very person whose name carried authority across the entire county. 45 minutes earlier, the day had seemed so ordinary it was almost boring. Betty had woken up in her new bedroom, sunlight spilling through curtains decorated with little butterflies. She tugged on her favorite purple dress and laced up those glittering sneakers, excited for her first real week of school in Maple Grove. Her mother, Sarah Williams, had braided her hair neatly, sliding a little ribbon into place before kneeling down to kiss her forehead. "Make today beautiful, baby girl," Sarah had whispered, her voice warm but tired. She was always tired. Years of 12-hour shifts and late-night meetings had left shadows under her eyes, but she never let Betty feel the weight of it. To the neighbors, Sarah was just another newcomer, a single mother moving into one of the most exclusive cul-de-sacs in Riverside County. But what they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just any parent. She was Chief Sarah Williams, the county's first black female police chief, a woman who had battled her way through systemic doubt, endless obstacles, and quiet prejudice to earn the badge pinned on her uniform. She had chosen Maple Grove for one reason: safety. A quiet community, a strong school system, streets lined with trimmed hedges, and freshly painted mailboxes. This was supposed to be the place where Betty could ride her bike without fear, where childhood could unfold the way it should. Innocent, curious, full of wonder. Betty's world, however, was about to collide with Jane Mitchell's bitterness. Jane had spent 2 weeks watching from her window, cataloging every movement the new family made. Her life, once polished and comfortable, had unraveled in divorce, unemployment, and loneliness. And instead of rebuilding, she had sharpened her pain into suspicion. When she saw Betty kneeling near the community mailbox with her magnifying glass, wonder etched across her face as she studied a sparkling rock, Jane didn't see innocence. She saw danger. She didn't see a child. She saw. Betty looked up from her shiny discovery, just in time to hear Jane's voice slice through the air. "What do you think you're doing here?" The tone was sharp, accusing, the kind of voice that made even grown adults bristle. Betty blinked, startled, and instinctively held out the rock with a shy smile. "Look what I found," she said, her voice small but hopeful. "My daddy used to say every rock has a story if you look close enough." For a fleeting second, there was nothing but the innocence of a child sharing wonder. But Jane's eyes hardened. She snatched the rock from Betty's hand and tossed it aside. "Don't give me that nonsense. You don't belong around here. Tell me where you live." Flustered, Betty pointed toward her street, her words tumbling over themselves. 412. No, 421, I think. Her little voice cracked under the pressure, her mistake simple, human. But to Jane, it was proof. She folded her arms, lips curling into a cruel smile. So now you're lying. First snooping, now lying. Typical. Betty's eyes welled with tears. She clutched Star, her stuffed unicorn, against her chest as if the soft toy could shield her from the storm gathering above her. Please, she whispered, I'm not bad. But Jane wasn't listening. She pulled out her phone, her thumb already hovering over the keypad. We'll let the police figure this out. She angled the screen toward Betty, recording as though catching a criminal in the act. The pit in Betty's stomach grew. To her, police meant trouble. Police meant punishment. The thought twisted inside her until panic bubbled to the surface. Her petals scraped against the pavement as she tried to ride away, but Jane followed close, voice raised, words barbed with authority. Neighbors began to drift toward their windows, drawn by the commotion. A few frowned, uneasy, but none spoke up. It was easier to watch than to intervene. Betty's bike wobbled, her tears blurring her vision. Then, with a sharp snap, her magnifying G. The broken glass sparkled in the afternoon sun, fragments scattering across the sidewalk like tiny stars. Betty slid off her bike, kneeling quickly, panic spilling from her in sobs. I'll fix it, I promise. Please don't be mad. Her small hands shook as she tried to gather the sharp pieces, her voice quivering with apology. Jane's eyes narrowed. She didn't see a child mourning a broken gift. She saw what she wanted to see, evidence. Now you're destroying property, she snapped, still filming, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. This is exactly what I was worried about. First snooping, now lying, now vandalism. Betty flinched at every word. The magnifying glass wasn't just glass and metal. It was the first gift from her new teacher, a token of encouragement for a little girl nervous about fitting in. To watch it break felt like losing a piece of her fresh start. Her sobs grew louder, and with every tear, Jane's certainty grew stronger. Across the street, Mrs. Chun, a quiet woman who had lived in Maple Grove for decades, paused with her watering can. She saw the little girl crouched by the mailbox, crying uncontrollably, and her grandmotherly instincts clenched tight around her heart. Still, she hesitated. Jane had a reputation in the neighborhood. Sharp tongue, sharp eyes, someone people avoided crossing. Mr. Rodriguez, trimming his hedges nearby, also noticed. He frowned, wiping sweat from his brow as he watched Jane loom over the trembling child. His gut twisted, but like Mrs. Chun, he hesitated. Jane was loud, authoritative, the type of neighbor who steamrolled dissent. Stop crying. Jane hissed, phone raised higher. You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself when the police get here. At that, Betty froze. Police. The word thundered in her ears. She remembered her mother's gentle warnings. Be polite, be careful, keep your hands where they can see them. But she was just a little girl, clutching a stuffed unicorn, unable to understand why she was. Suddenly the villain of someone else's story. From her lips, broken and trembling, came a plea no child should ever have to make. I want my mommy. Jane didn't soften at those words. If anything, they fueled her conviction. She tilted her phone slightly, ensuring the sobbing child was framed in the shot, her narration deliberate and loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Documenting suspicious activity, she announced, as though she were deputized by the community itself. This little girl has been casing our mailboxes and destroying property. Betty's tears blurred everything. She clutched Starter's chest, rocking slightly, her small voice repeating, I didn't do anything wrong. Please don't be mad. Please don't be mad. Her heart pounded so hard it made her chest ache, and every car passing on the street felt like it carried her doom. Across the street, Mrs. Chin's hands trembled on her watering can. She wanted to intervene, to scoop up the child and hush her cries, but fear pinned her in place. Jane's voice carried authority, and the idea of standing against her filled Mrs. Chun with dread. Mr. Rodriguez, however, shifted closer. He set down his hedge clippers, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing at the cruel spectacle before him. The girl wasn't a criminal. She was a child, terrified and small. His steps slowed as he approached, but Jane noticed. She waved him off with a curt flick of her hand, speaking louder. "I've got this under control. The police are on their way." The words rang like a bell in Betty's mind. The police. She hugged Star tighter, whispering, "I'm not bad. I'm not bad. Mommy says I'm good." Her tiny smartwatch buzzed against her wrist. It was supposed to be a safety net, a way to call her mother in emergencies. With shaky fingers, she pressed the screen, whispering into it as if her mother could hear. "Mommy, help me. Please come home. A scary lady's being mean." She called the police. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the call didn't connect. Tears streamed down her face as she kept whispering into silence. In the distance, faint at first, the sound of sirens began to rise, sharp, piercing, unstoppable. Betty froze, her stomach twisting with dread. For her, sirens didn't mean safety anymore. They meant the end. The wail of sirens grew louder, bouncing off the manicured houses of Maple Grove. Neighbors who had ignored the earlier commotion now stepped onto porches, curiosity outweighing caution. Curtains twitched, doors creaked open, and soon half the street was watching. Some leaned against their fences, whispering to each other, while others pulled out phones to record. Jane straightened, her shoulders squaring with a smug kind of pride. To her, the flashing lights would be vindication, proof that her instincts about the Williams family were right all along. She muttered under her breath, "Now you'll see what happens when you bring trouble into this neighborhood." Betty, on the other hand, nearly collapsed. She crouched lower to the ground, pressing her unicorn so tight against her chest that its fabric seemed strained. Her voice trembled in a whisper only Mrs. Chun, now inching closer, could hear. "They're coming for me. I'm going to jail. Mommy's going to be so mad." Mrs. Chen's heart cracked at the words. This was no troublemaker. This was a frightened little girl who believed her world was ending. Gathering courage, she stepped forward, kneeling beside Betty and speaking softly in her broken English. "Sure, little one, you safe. You not bad, girl. You just child." Betty's tear-streaked face lifted toward her, eyes wide with desperate hope. "But she called the police," Betty whispered. "Police only come for bad people." Before Mrs. Chun could answer, 3 patrol cars screeched to a stop, lights flashing red and blue across the cul-de-sac. The atmosphere shifted instantly, from tense curiosity to electric fear. Officer Jackson, a seasoned veteran, stepped out first, followed by Officer Miller, his reputation built on being tough on crime, and Officer Thompson, the rookie still learning to balance instinct with training. They expected danger. What they found was a sobbing 7-year-old clutching a stuffed unicorn. Yet instead of immediate compassion, protocol took over. They scanned the scene with sharp eyes, their attention guided by Jane, who rushed toward them with the authority of someone who believed she was in charge. "There!" Jane exclaimed, pointing at Betty. "That's the one I told you about. She's been tampering with mailboxes, lying about her address, destroying property. Dangerous. Unstable. You need to do something now." Officer Jackson narrowed his eyes, glancing between Jane's urgent finger and the tiny figure crouched behind the tree. The girl's shoulders shook with sobs, her stuffed unicorn pressed like a shield against her face. He frowned. This didn't look like dangerous or unstable. But Jane's confidence was unshakable, her voice layered with false concern. "Officers, don't let her innocent look fool you," Jane said, lowering her phone as if presenting evidence. She was casing the mailboxes with some kind of device. "When I questioned her, she lied. Then she destroyed property. She's been acting erratically for nearly an hour." Officer Miller scribbled notes, his jaw set. 10 years on the force had taught him to take every report seriously, no matter how strange. Criminals came in all shapes, all ages. That's what he told himself as he walked toward Betty. "Little girl," he said sternly, "we need to ask you a few questions." The tone made Betty flinch. To her, it wasn't procedure, it was punishment. She curled smaller, whispering, "I didn't do anything wrong. Please, I just found a rock." Officer Thompson, the rookie, hesitated. Training screamed at her to trust her instincts, and her instincts said this was a child, terrified beyond reason, not a suspect. She opened her mouth, but Miller's authority cut over her. "We'll handle this by the book." The neighbors pressed closer, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Mrs. Chin stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. "Officers, she is just child. She find rock, that is all. No bad." Mr. Rodriguez added, "I saw it too. She was just looking. This doesn't feel right." Jane's glare silenced them. "You don't understand," she snapped. "I know what I saw. This child doesn't belong here." The weight of her words hung heavy. Doesn't belong. To Betty, it confirmed her worst fear, that no matter what she said, no one would believe her. She raised her tear-streaked face, her voice a broken whisper that hushed even the murmuring crowd. "I just want my mommy." And though no one knew it yet, her mommy was closer than anyone realized, and her arrival would shatter the balance of power in an instant.